It's a chance to honor Harriet's memory, to celebrate her life. And as a people, we've become all too practiced at this. As a local community, we've become all too practiced at it. And yet every time it strikes us as if we've never experienced it before. Such are God's ways. We learn not to question, and we learn how to say, even in moments like this, Baruch Dayan Emet, God, you are a truthful judge. And to offer our thanks and our praise to God for all the gifts, even in our sadness. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini balemot, I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our beloved Harriet. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Harriet's love that united us in life, which death cannot take from us. For her companionship that was shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of our memories. For the gifts of her heart and mind that brought joy and happiness and are now precious remembrance. For all these and more, we thank God. And in this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness. It tells of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Adonai mi yagor be'oholecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha, holech tamim ufoel tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavo. God, who may abide in your house, who may dwell on your holy mountain, those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binodeshe yorbitzeni al memenuchot yenahaleni, nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni v'magle tzedek lema'an shemo, gam ki elech beget salmavet, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha al mishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, Dishanta v'Hashem roshi kosi rivaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. O God, you are my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me to lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in straight paths for the sake of your name. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Esoenai el heharim עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם אדוני עושה שמים וארץ. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from God, the maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. Eshet chayil mi yimtza, v'rachok mipninim michra, batach ba lev bala v'shalal lo yechsar. A woman of valor, who can find her? She is more precious than fine pearls. Her family trusts in her, and so they lack nothing. She does them good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. Words from the book of Job, a book we have been studying here for over a year now, as part of a group that Harriet was once part of. And I can't tell you how many weeks at the end of a discussion I walk out thinking, if Harriet was here, what would she have added to this discussion? In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach. Yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief, with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. Yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, that there is strength in faith. And so with Job we say, Adonai natan, God, you have given. You gave us Harriet, a loved one, a friend who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, you have now taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, as we now struggle to say, Yehi shem Adonai mevarach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. I invite you all to take a moment of silent remembrance, reflection, and prayer at this time. May the words of our mouths, the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Jewish tradition calls for hesped, for eulogy, for those who are leaving this earth. one last set of honors that we can provide to a loved one or a friend. Remembering, even through our pain, what was good, what was best about them. It is through these words of eulogy, these good words from the Greek and the Latin, that we truly get the opportunity to celebrate the life lived. And in Harriet's case, a life well lived. Even with the challenges she faced at the end that limited her, the ones that we choose to look past at a moment such as this. We celebrate who she was to us, what we learned from her, how she helped us, how she allowed us to help her in the end as well. And like a fine, well-cut, polished diamond, sometimes what we saw, even with somebody who was as what you see is what you get, as Harriet Suskin was and is. What we saw depends on where we stood in relation to her. And so this morning we are fortunate to have several people willing and hopefully able to share memories as we celebrate Harriet's life, and we begin with her good friend, Linda Epstein.
He told me to come to his side. I'm not used to
Yeah, you're not used to being
I'm
on
not
this
used to
side.
being on that side. My friend Harriet. My very dear friend Harriet. I've known Harriet for many, many years. We sang in the choir together, and she always had to sit next to Leon because Leon had a strong voice and she sang men's bass. We were in a couple of book groups together. We really enjoyed each other's company very, very much. We became much closer after both of us retired, which is over 20 years ago. We used to shop together. We often ate out together. When asking people, I called a number of people to let them know that Harriet had passed, and they gave me adjectives about Harriet when I called them. They said she was caring, she was kind, she was sweet, she was pleasant, and she was very friendly. And these are all true of Harriet. She was all of those things. She used to do things for people, a lot of things for people. One of the things she did is made earrings. She was really a good jeweler. She had a lope, and she liked to study jewelry. And she made earrings for people she cared about. And I have a lot of Harriations, she called them. She had a little card, she put them on, and it said Harriations. And I have a lot of earrings in many, many different colors. I'm wearing a pair today that she made for me. She was also very artistic. She did wood carving. She carved wooden spoons. That was almost a specialty. She did other carvings as well. And she had a wonderful collection of carved wooden spoons in her home that she had on display, plus other original art in her home. I have one of her carved wooden spoons on display in my kitchen, and it's very special to me. She was extraordinarily intelligent. She could grasp onto and converse about very difficult concepts. She attended Torah study together with me and the other people in the Torah study group, and she could follow the complex comments and create and also make complex comments at Torah study. She was an avid reader. She read lots and lots of things. As a matter of fact, Danny gave me bags of books, which I now have to figure out what to do with, that were Harriet's. So I'm going to have to go through them at some point. We often exchanged books and we discussed them. We read some of the same books. It was so difficult for her friends and her family to adjust to her having Alzheimer's. But even with this horrible disease, Whenever I saw her, she remained pleasant and loving to her family or friends. She smiled when I visited and conversed with me and seemed really happy to see me. And she would ask me, how's your family doing? And even though she probably forgot I was there 10 minutes after I left, it was still nice to be there to converse with her and bring a little joy into her life for the moment, because she really enjoyed when people came to visit. She so very much appreciated her two daughters, Alana and Daniela. They did so many wonderful things for her too. They were wonderful, wonderful daughters. You have nothing to be regretting about, both of you. Alana came almost every Sunday to check on her. She paid her bills, just keep her company. She also went with her for most of her doctor appointments. So she was checking on her all the time. Danny, who lived in New Orleans area, couldn't do this every week like that, but she visited very frequently, and she was very attentive and loving to her. Harriet used to tell me about her and Danny staying up late watching movies, and Harriet just loved that. She thought that was the most wonderful thing. It was so fun. Harriet often was the life of the party and the fun person in the groups that she was in. She had a very good sense of humor, and I will really, really miss her.
Thank you, Linda. It's one of the more interesting aspects of the Jewish tradition that the expectation of us as a community is that at moments like this, we show up in support of the family. So much so that the tradition has developed that when one is in mourning, one is given permission and expectation to be so focused on their own needs and honoring their loved one that even a basic courtesy like thanking people for their support is not only not expected, we're told we're not supposed to do it because it gets in the way of what we're supposed to be doing as mourners. It's at moments like this that I'm grateful to be Harriet's rabbi, to only feel like I'm a member of the family and not actually be one, which allows me on their behalf to thank all of you for being here and being part of Harriet's life. And I know in their own way they're going to share those words as well. Daniela, you ready?
Okay. So, my mother was a loving mother. Excuse me. I don't have this. Okay. She was a loving mother, wife, and friend. She was an independent spirit. She was a proud career woman, working for Adult Protective Services, helping the elderly. She was married to my dad for more than 50 years. They were each other's best friends, and if they had ever stopped arguing with each other, I really would have been worried. She was a pillar of support through my entire life, not just for me, but for all of her friends and family. I mean, just without her, I would be nothing. I would know nothing. I wouldn't know how to think or even how to be. You know, when I picture her in my head, I think of her dressed for work, with her black and silver hair fluffed, her festive jewelry suited in purple, fuchsia, turquoise, and teal, like a hothouse flower planted in drab surroundings. She loved bright color, and that was her. Bright, cheery, artsy, brilliant, loving, special. We had slowly been losing bits of her, but she still remained herself at the core. Her cheery disposition persevered, and thankfully she remained through all of this loss of self. I mean, she really saved the day by preserving that core. Her determined positivity saved us from what could have been so much worse. And then my mother also randomly had books where she kept notes everywhere, and you'll go around the house and open them up, and there will be a quote in them. And so this book that I wrote this talk in randomly had a quote, so I'm going to end with that. Be not afraid of being alone, but of loneliness, the awareness of being alone. And that was her words of wisdom that she shared with me this morning.
Thank you, Daniela. Alana?
There's a parable in the Talmud about the interaction between the soul and the body. It begins, there was a king who had a fine orchard, and in it there were fine first fruits of a fig tree, and he stationed 2 guards in the orchard, one who was unable to walk and one who was blind. Neither was capable of reaching the fruit on the trees in the orchard without the assistance of the other. The lame person said to the blind person, "I see those fine fruits on the fig tree in the orchard. Come and put me on your shoulders. I'll guide you to the tree and we'll bring the figs and eat them." So the lame person rode on the shoulders of the blind person, and they brought the figs and they ate them. Sometime later, the owner of the fruit tree of the orchard came to the orchard, and he said to the guards, "Where are all of my fruit?" And the lame person said, "Well, do I have legs that I could be able to walk and take the figs?" And the blind person said, "Do I have eyes that I could see where the figs were?" So the owner of the orchard put the lame person on the shoulders of the blind person, just as they did when they stole the figs, and he judged them together. The Jewish tradition doesn't see the body and soul as things which are separate or in opposition to each other, but rather as parts of a whole that make the whole person. Diagnosis of Alzheimer's is particularly devastating, not only to the person who receives it, but to everyone who loves them. I know that it was the one thing my mother feared most, and I think that might be true for many or even most of us, especially in a community that values the intellect. It's difficult to imagine a more horrifying future to face. And my mother was brilliant. She loved art and music and literature. I learned to love poetry because our bookshelves were filled with volumes that she collected. She was an early feminist, and she taught me early to be one. I remember her telling me about going to college against my grandfather's wishes and how her mother, my grandmother, secretly brought her money and food to make sure that she was able to go to college. My mother was creative, as both Daniela and Linda mentioned. She painted, she taught painting classes, she sculpted. Her whole life, our house was filled with any kind of art supply you could possibly imagine, in fact, still is. She made jewelry for everyone in her circle. She could have sold it if she wanted to. She didn't. She just made it for the people she loved. She was a first adopter for technology. The same model of the first computer we ever used is currently on display in the Smithsonian, a Franklin Ace. Feel old yet? I didn't know anyone else who had a computer as early as we did. If there was a gadget out there, she tried it out. She loved trying new things. And dear Lord, every health food fad that ever happened, I am still traumatized by lecithin oil and wheat germ from that era. She loved trying new cuisines, and I'm sure that my sister and I both got our openness to new foods, new tech, and new people from her. And so it was really sad to see that begin to constrict as the disease began to affect her. And she began to like simpler foods and movies and TV shows that she'd already seen. She couldn't finish new books, but she could for a while reread the ones she'd loved before. But what never changed was her love for people. For many people who have Alzheimer's, the loss of control makes them angry and difficult. But with my mother, that never happened. She maintained her sense of humor literally up to the last days of her life, joking with the nurses who were bathing her, "You know, I should charge you for this." When I was in high school, she took in friends who didn't have any other place to go. We had, for years, people living with us because their parents threw them out or moved away or some other craziness like that. Her aides loved her. Her friends loved her. And even when she reached the point where she couldn't remember what she had said 15 seconds prior, The questions that she would repeat over and over reflected her ongoing deep sweetness. It was, can I do anything for you? Are you hungry? Do you need anything? And that was really Mom to the core, someone who loved to take care of and do for others. And just to diverge for a brief second, if a person is judged by the quality of their friends, that by itself would count in her favor. Linda Epstein and Nancy Storer were the most loyal of friends who were with her literally until the last day of her life, for which my sister and I are going to always be grateful. Alzheimer's tests the idea that a soul and body are inextricably linked for many people. But I think that in my mother's case, it isn't such a hard test. Although as the disease progressed, her life became more limited, her core self still shone through. Her desire to take care of other people never left her. Her love for her family and her friends shone through. If the soul can be judged by one's actions in extremity, my mother will stand before the Beit Din Shel Mala, the heavenly court, and no doubt already be advocating for the rest of us as she's ushered into the world to come.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear from your mouth the words that were in my head about that connection between body and soul and mind. I share your thoughts and experience, both in general and in Harriet's case. And I think in Harriet's case, being freed from being able to do the heavy thinking that brought her such joy in the rest of her life allowed that core of that caregiving, loving, compassionate friend and parent to shine through even more, to be seen without distraction. When it's all she had left to be able to turn to, she embraced it even stronger. And that's a blessing. It's a hard blessing. It's a blessing born of pain and loss, but it's a blessing. And Jewish life is that way. Some of the blessings that we carry the furthest are the ones that we discover after going through the greatest trials. I remember shortly after the horrible shootings in Pittsburgh, and we as every community said, what do we have to do here to make sure it doesn't happen? We called upon our Homeland Security expert from the community. He came, he looked, he evaluated. It was his job in real time. He did it for us as a member of the community. And the first thing he said was, that spot in the parking lot that says reserved for rabbi has to go. It makes it too easy for the rabbi to become a target. And I laughed at Jeff and I said, have you seen my car? It's the bright red one with all the bumper stickers out there. If somebody really wants to know where I am, I'm not hard to find. I thought of that story this week because one of the first memories I carry of Harriet is driving behind her, reading that bumper sticker, the one that says, obedient women rarely make history. That was not a bumper sticker. That was an affirmation that she chose to put on her card to identify that it was hers. She lived those words. She taught those words. She shared those words with all of us. You used the word advocate. It's on my short list of words to make sure I use today too. The Harriet Suskin I knew when I came here, and she was one of the first people I got to meet when I came here 25 years ago. I believe she was part of the committee that hired me, which was a great choice by the leaders of this community to include her in that. Because at one and the same time, it brought out that Jewish mother hen side of her. I had a hand in picking this one. I'm going to protect him. which I was eternally grateful for. If you've ever been on the other side, you want Harriet to think of you as someone who she can protect. Because it also made her one of the ones most comfortable to immediately come to me and tell me when I could have done something perhaps just a little bit better. Never angrily, never unfairly, never without taking my feelings into consideration. She was a great mentor and a great resource because of that. The story about the parking spot also comes to mind because this was the same woman who, when I came here 25 years ago, was already working as a member of the governor's commission on cemeteries and burial practices. And at the same time working on the Jewish side of that discussion when there were issues in the Jewish community to make sure that we had affordable, available Jewish funerals, regardless of our circumstances. And I know how she got there, even though it was before I came. It was because of the advocacy work she was doing for adults. That's how she was distinguished enough to be recognized and put on the committee by the governor. It's why she wanted to get involved. She was the one who walked me through what we do as a community in moments like this. For years, if I wasn't sure, I would pick up the phone and say, Harriet, I got a question. Fortunately, I think after 25 years, I may have this down because there were a couple of moments I was tempted to call the last couple of days, as I'm sure you were as well, as I'm sure we all were. I shared a part of this story on Friday night. She was part of our Torah study group. She was an active part of our Torah study group, even at the point where that infernal disease was already starting to take its toll, because she just loved the discussions. Even if she wasn't getting much out of them anymore that she could retain, she still loved the discussions for the sake of the learning and the discussion itself. And I remember there was one day, and I have no idea how we got into it, but we got into a discussion on the very nature of numbers and mathematics. Is it something that human beings created out of necessity, or was it something that was baked into God's creation and bequeathed to us? Not exactly the typical conversation a rabbi has with one of their congregants. And she brought perspective to it that I had never considered before. She taught me things in that discussion and made me think things that I hadn't thought of before. And it wasn't the only time. I'm looking around the room at all of the earrings. I know my own wife, Lauren, is wearing a set that Harriet made for her today, too, in honor, so I'm well aware. There was a day 19 years ago. For those of you who remember back that far from the congregation, as I was working my way back from my surgery, there was a family wedding in the Suskin family in Baltimore. We were there. I was doing the wedding. Lauren's looking now going, oh my God, I remember this. Because this is who Harriet was. Now, you'll notice, I pointed her out deliberately because it's actually part of the point of the story. My wife right now is sitting in the back. It's where she usually sits in moments like this. We got to this wedding and she went to sit in the back. Harriet, knowing that she was concerned whether I would get through the ceremony, because it was literally one of the first things I was doing back, and it was 100 degrees at the Museum of Industry in Baltimore, and it was outside under the pagoda. Harriet dragged her to the front row, where she didn't usually sit either, let's be honest, and then motioned for Lauren to come sit with them. to help Lauren get through the ceremony and her doubts and concerns for me. Not because they needed to be up front to participate, but out of concern for someone else. She was there to celebrate with the bride and groom. And she did. But she didn't let that stop her from doing what else needed to be done. And that's what I always appreciated, and that's what I will always remember about Harriet. Because we need more Harriet Suskins in this world. And we need more of them every day. And we've just lost the best one we had. It's a big loss. But the Jewish tradition also teaches us in moments like this that it's not a loss, it's a transition. And the transition is that we become the carriers of everything Harriet taught us, that everything cared enough about to be involved with and teach and act and do. It is now on us to be the Harriet Suskins, to be the disobedient women, even us men, that this world needs, saying what needs to be said, doing what needs to be done. May we be worthy of being half as good as she was. Ki nehi ratzon, may it be God's will. Amen. In a moment, we're going to conclude our time here in the sanctuary. Those of us who are heading out to the cemetery will get our instructions from the funeral directors. We will gather at Mount Lebanon for the burial, and I'll let them give the full details. I invite you to rise physically and spiritually as you are able for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim shochein bamromim Hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina im kedoshim utehorim kezohar harakia mazerim et nishmat Chanan bat Ipa shehalcha leolama Bal harachamim yastireha beseter kenafav leolamim Vayitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachlata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Harriet Suskin, who has entered eternity. God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings. Let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God, you are her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen.
Family and friends, we're proceeding to the Mount Lebanon Cemetery in Hyattsville service for Maryland. We are not doing a formal procession on 50 and 495. You'll find directions to the cemetery in your program. If you are going onto the cemetery, strongly encourage you to use the restroom facility.